So hello, everyone, and welcome back to the ICFJ Global Health Crisis Reporting Forum and to our webinar series in partnership with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, also known as OCCRP. If you don't know me yet, I'm Stella Roque, Director of Community Engagement at the International Center for Journalists here in Washington, D.C. And joining us today from OCCRP is data journalist Adriana Homolova, also known as Ada, to discuss a one-of-a-kind trove of European procurement data, as well as her tips on going about collecting this kind of data and analyzing it in your own regions, and how you can access OCCRP's data for your own stories. Along with media partners in 37 countries, OCCRP collected information from over 37,800 COVID-19 related tenders and contracts worth over 21 billion euros. And for those in the US, that's 24.9 billion US dollars, running from February to October of this year. They cover key goods such as personal protective equipment, ventilators, tests, and medications. Ada also mentioned in a call to me that as far as she's aware, no other stories at a cross-border level have been published about COVID-19 procurement data. So if this is something you're interested in doing in your own regions, you've come to the right webinar. And a reminder to everyone tuning in, if you have questions during this discussion and you're on the Facebook forum group, please post them in the comments of the Facebook live stream. If you're in the Zoom chat here with us, we'll open it up for audience questions and we'll unmute you to talk to us. Ada has also informed me that two of the reporters who've worked with her on this project, ICFJ Knight Fellow Data Lindell, who's also currently with OCCRP, and Rui Barros out in Portugal is going to be joining us later during the webinar during audience questions. So thank you so much for joining us, Ada, and a thank you to Data and Louise for being here as well.
Thank you, Stella. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, we're thrilled. I'm actually going to screen share the page with this story because it's quite a fascinating analysis of procurement data. And I hope the participants really got a chance to read this in advance. It's on OCCRP's website if you haven't seen it yet, but we will sort of talk through it because this is a little bit of a story walkthrough. So to begin with, although I did encourage everyone to read this story in advance, could you summarize some of the findings in this data analysis for us and what it tells us about procurement during the pandemic in Europe?
Yes, so I have to, as a disclaimer, I'm getting a bit ill with everybody, so I'm a little bit slower today, but I'll do my best for you. So in this data collection, okay, so in this story we collected data from about 37 countries in Europe, 36 actually, and looked at their COVID-19 procurement. And what we found was very different per country, because, for example, countries such as Portugal, or Lithuania, or Poland, they were publishing special overviews of the tenders, of the pandemic tenders or the emergency tenders, while in some of the countries in Europe there was virtually no data. This is, for example, the Netherlands or Denmark. And even when we asked in a FOIA request in, for example, Norway, they have declined us access to this data, like what was bought, masks, tenders for masks, ventilators, and so forth. So there was a first difference that we encountered while collecting this data. And further on, what we found was that lots of these procurements, which would kind of foresee, lots of these procurements were done without any competition. So the government would go on a market. Normally the government would go on a market and they would say, okay, we needed this product, and then companies would come in and they start competing for these government contracts, because these are quite huge contracts often. Now with the pandemics, the situation was reversed. So the companies had products, companies had masks, and the governments came in to compete for those products. So this created a very, very weird dynamics on the market. And we could see that in the data, like there There were contracts going out for millions of euros without any competition, just directly awarded to one party. This is, as I don't have to tell you, this is very corruption sensitive. And further on, we went into looking into certain goods that were purchased, certain equipment, and we did a short analysis, a small analysis on the FFP2 respirator masks. And we found out that, you know, there were prices ranging from 20 cents per mask to 37 euros per mask in different countries, which is, I mean, the average was about 4 euros, but around it there was like a huge difference. And in these data, there's also many stories to be found. So, for example, those very cheap FFP2 respirators turned out not to be FFP2 respirators at all. So FFP2 respirators are respirators that filter out about 95% of all the particles, and they're meant to be used in hospitals, right? So people who really need it. And these 20 cents respirators were, for example, in Czech Republic, they were just surgical masks. So they had no filtering capabilities whatsoever. And on the other side of the spectrum, you know, we also found very, very expensive masks. So
now I'm a bit curious, in the procurement data, did you have the names of the corporations and companies? And for example, was there a single company that sold certain PPE or any other product to more than one country and was pricing it differently based on the contracts?
This is a very, very good question. This is an analysis that we did not do in the end because of time restrictions, and this is an analysis I would love to see. You know, this is also why I'm here, because we opened up the data to different. We opened up all the data that we gathered, and there were for sure there were companies that were procuring cross-border. They were, I think I found about 30 of them. These are also, most of the time, these were big corporations, you know, Abbott, Roche, Philips. So these multinationals that are actually also in the field, that we found out that they did that. I did not go into this way, but this is a perfect question, obviously, to be investigated.
Yeah, to be working on a story on. That's brilliant. And when you and your media partners started this project, how did you go about collecting the data and compiling it together?
Yeah, so we had there are a couple of ways. So first off, there's this big database called TED, and it's Tender Electronics Daily. It's a database. It's a data that's being collected by the European Commission in a way that every country sends their own tenders there, and they publish it on their platform. That is, and they standardize it and publish it on the platform. So, but there is only where the biggest of the tenders come. And for the Netherlands is, for example, about 100,000 euros. All the procurement is about 100,000 euros. And so this was sort of the baseline. And then we went on to local procurement databases. So, for example, as I said, Lithuania has published a special overview of all their emergency procurements. So this was just a spreadsheet which we could take. Then there were platforms, for example, Spain, where we needed to scrape the data from their websites. We also had partners that sent out FOIAs. So, for example, in Italy, we get some data from FOIAs. In Sweden too. We had partners who went themselves scraping their websites, scraping the websites of their own country. For example, in Portugal, where my colleague Rui, who's also in the audience here, done the extraction of the data from the contracts there. And we had also one party in Austria that had their own source, secret source in the government, who kind of provided us with data. So they come from many different sources.
And one of the things this story discusses, this data analysis, is sort of the problem of transparency in getting access to data, which is a huge surprise because European countries tend to be democratic. One would think that data should be open and public, because it's where, citizens' tax dollars are being spent.
Yes.
Among, I think that's probably one of the things you mentioned that were probably one of the biggest challenges to getting access to data. But are there any other challenges sort of around the transparency issue for some of the media partners that you were working with on this project?
Yeah, so there are two levels to this transparency question, right? So first level is like, what do you publish like by default? So if I go on the website and I can, get it myself, that's the first level. And the second level is the FOIA. And what our media partners encountered in many countries is that FOIA was suspended. So even if you ask for the data, they would not give it. And that was for, I think, so FOIA was suspended for a couple of months, like in general, in many European countries. So I'm not sure how it is now, because Europe has its second wave now. And at that time, they said, this is an emergency situation, which it was, because nobody was really prepared. Now, I'm not sure it still applies, because you could expect a second wave. So I'm not sure whether they're gonna also now suspend FOIA and so forth. I hope not, because then it doesn't make sense.
And
does it answer your question?
Yes, most definitely. And which countries sort of like, what surprised you in the process of data gathering? Like one of the things you mentioned is that you were surprised by certain countries that didn't have that data at all published anywhere, and you weren't able to access it, correct? So which countries were those?
Yes, so I come from Slovakia, where procurement data is open by default, and that's how I actually started looking into the data, because it's a very interesting data, right? These are our tax money being given to companies, and I started looking into this data, and then I moved to the Netherlands. And I wanted to do the same in the Netherlands, and the procurement data is just not there, which surprised me immensely. But this was already 6 years ago. So in the meantime, I think nothing surprises me anymore about the transparency of public spending. But to really name and shame, it's Belgium, Netherlands, Switzerland, Denmark, and Norway that really refused to open anything. To shame even further, Germany has no local procurement published, as well as France doesn't. So you know about the biggest contracts, but not about the below threshold, so below the 100,000 euros. And to name good examples, it would be Lithuania, Portugal, Czech, Slovakia. It would be around those. I think even, but I'm not. I mean, I think Moldova is also very good in publishing spending data. So there's a huge discrepancy. So in terms of surprised, does not really surprise me. Norway surprised me, because Norway is generally a very transparent country. In Norway, even people's incomes are transparent, like what people make, like the taxes, and this is not, which really surprised me.
Was there any way to kind of go around that challenge? So like, for example, if you couldn't get the procurement data from official sources, were there any, for example, private databases you could access? Any way that you could kind of go around and still get that data?
No, there are no private databases. So it's really up to the member state in Europe. It's really up to member state how they publish their data. And if they don't, they don't. And the what they use as a reason is that this is company sensitive data, and that publishing this data would undermine their negotiation positions, and that it would kind of expose company secrets or something.
Even if there wasn't competition for a tender, that's quite interesting.
I know. And even this is public money, and this is what I hear a lot in the Netherlands, for example. So the Netherlands really wants to protect their business partners. So that's the reason why. And if we had more time and resources, what I would do is just go in and really FOIA the living everything out of them. And if they say no, you need to go to court. You really need to fight to get this data out in some countries.
Now, importantly, a lot of our audience comes from Africa, from Latin America, from South Asia. Do you know, like in your own sort of expertise of procurement data, which countries might have it openly available, or if not, for example, where these journalists should start looking for this procurement data if they wanted to do a similar story in their own regions?
So there has been a similar story done already in Latin America. It was coordinated by Poder in Mexico, I believe. And this was done a couple of months ago already and published. If somebody's from the region in the audience and they would like to find and read about that, I recommend you to search for that. It's also in the open contracting newsletter that I shared with you, Stella.
Is that, hold on, let me just open that tab up.
That's the one here? So yeah.
Contracting data investigation.
Open contracting is a very, very good place to start because they have this government data standard where they work with different governments in different parts of the world. So for example, they work with the government, I think in Kenya, or with NGO. In Kenya, I know about Kyrgyzstan, that they work with CLOP there as a news organization. So yeah, have a look at open contracting for sure, because they do work with organizations from all over the world. And if you can't find any known hint about the country where you come from, you can always get in touch with them. They are very, very helpful, enthusiastic bunch, really nerds into public spending. So I would encourage you to have a look through what they have.
Now, for the journalists who are here today who might want access to the European data that OCCRP compiled, where can they access that?
So if you go back to our article and you scroll to the beginning.
There we go.
There on the right hand side there is download the data tables. And they are, here are two main data sets, and this is the public spending tracker and the unit prices data. And the difference is that in the first one, you have all the tenders that we have collected divided by country. So every tab is different country. And in the unit prices, we have collected data on really the equipment. So they are categorized, not all of them, but in the column B of the product category. So in this way we tried to make this data set cross-country comparable. So, and you also have a reference to the tender database there in the column K. So if you wanna join the data from this table to the other, you can use that tender reference. And yeah, and there's also if you go to the GitHub tab, Stella, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Also, we published on GitHub our scripts, cleaning scripts and exports of cleaned data with some examples and explanations onto what's to be found in the data. And yeah, I cannot stress this enough. I'm sure we did not do all the stories that are possible to make with this data. So please have a look at it, and if you need any help, or if you don't understand, get in touch with us, and we are very happy to help.
Yeah, and it would be really interesting if the journalists actually looked at the multinational corporations who are working not only in Europe selling these products, but also in Africa, also in Latin America, and also in Asia, and to kind of look at it comparatively and see how they're pricing these products.
Yes.
Okay, so
yes,
go on.
If I can add, what we found, for example, with the mask is a hypothesis that we could not explore further as well, but we found out that in many countries of Eastern Europe, these unit prices for masks were more than countries of Western Europe. And now you can ask yourself, is this because they got worse prices, or is this because of corruption? So these are very, I mean, there are interesting questions still waiting to be explored in this data.
So there are stories. Journalists should check this out. I'm gonna just stop sharing the screen for a moment. And I know we have Dada here. Dada, I'm going to allow you to talk. And I'm gonna see, and Dada, hey, now I can hear you.
Hey.
Would you like me to turn on your camera? I just want to ask first before I do that.
Yes, if you wish.
Oh, brilliant. So we have two surprise guests who are Ada's team members here. So I'm gonna promote you to panelist. And I think you should be able to turn on your camera now.
Yeah, hey.
Hold on. There we go. Welcome,
yeah,
Dada. Dada is one of our ICFJ Night Fellows working with OCCRP. We're so happy to have you here. And I'm actually going to, hi, Hui, how are you? Let me just, oh, here we go.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can I promote you to a panelist and also turn on your camera?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, excellent. Here we go.
Okay, just give me 1 second to turn my camera on.
No problem. This is very cool to have two surprise guests here to help answer audience questions. We're so happy to have you. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to unmute some of the members of this audience to ask questions. I see Abdi Nasser raising his hand. So
Can I just add something?
Oh yeah,
very shortly. Just for the participants to know, Dada did the analysis on medicines, so COVID-19 related medicines, so they know everything about that. And Rui did the local data collection in Portugal, where he had to scrape a lot and categorize a lot, and he did a fabulous job. So just so you know.
Brilliant.
So there.
Thank you so much.
Give an example where you want to implement it.
Oh.
Hello.
Hi, Abdi Nasser. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm very glad to participate in this meeting.
We're happy to have you here.
I'm very sorry this COVID-19 affected all journalists. I'm freelance journalist. I'm photographer. I'm from Somalia, but I live in Europe now.
Excellent.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we do. So you're from Somalia and you live in Europe right now?
Yes, and many journalists work in blogs or pages affected COVID-19. How can you help with that group is my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. You skipped a bit, Abdi Nasser. What was your question precisely?
My question is, many journalists for pages have problem for COVID-19 affected situation of. Sorry, I have been in the city. I have no internet good. I have problem for internet. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Hello.
So
Hello.
you're asking many journalists have problems now, like because of COVID-19. But what do you mean, like in terms of being? Is this a question about the data story?
Yeah. That's question. Yeah. While I'm here, I have no good internet connection for.
Oh.
Do you hear me?
Oh no. How about you type your question on the chat and we'll get to it. I think maybe that might be easier. Thank you so much, Abdi Nasser. I see Kunal. Kunal, I'm going to allow you to talk. Kunal, can
hello,
you hear
everyone.
me? Hello,
yeah, I can
how are you? Where are you?
I'm doing good. I'm located in India. It's in Assam.
Oh, wow. Excellent. What's your question for us today?
Yes, so I wanted to know the Indian government is quite queer, right, while revealing data or related to the tenders and all the PPE kits and everything else. So do you have any website or any tools from where I can get the data in case if the government officials they deny?
That's a good question. Does anyone have an answer to that? So this is India in particular.
Ooh, I don't know much about public tenders in India, but is it something that is standardly open there by the government, Kunal, or is it not? Because I know a little bit about Bangladesh, for example, which is obviously a completely different country. But in there, I heard that the tenders are actually not open because they are being done more like country to country, like the government with for example, Russia, and then Russia said, okay, you have this company that can do this for you, for example. So I don't know how it works in India.
So is there any way where I can check the records, or maybe I can get through like if they are getting all these tenders done from a different country, or even if they've got it in their own in our own country. I would like to know if there is any way where we'll be able to like get the government data and then.
Yeah, if when it comes to tenders, I really encourage you to contact Open Contracting. I have put the link in the chat because they know everything about tender data in various countries in the world, and I see the data also has pasted a link in the chat, so maybe have a look.
Yeah, because sorry, Ada, you posted the link only for panelists, and actually the chat didn't see it, I think.
Oh
yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's why I doubled your link for everyone.
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much.
We're all learning to use Zoom this year.
Yeah, I just can't try to. Oh no. Okay, I'll finalize an attendees. Yes. So please have a look there, Kunal, and
and I see
after works.
Yeah, and I see Kunal also ask whether Indian contracting data can be found on OCCRP's website right now. I think the answer to that is no at the moment.
Unfortunately, it's there's also, I mean, there's an added complexity, I think, to Indian data probably, and it's the different scripts, that's different alphabets. So yeah, we did not really get into that.
Okay, all right. So in any case, if you need if you need any data from India, so I'd be the person, so I can really help. I was working on this story for a couple of weeks, and I'm glad that you brought up this topic today. And
brilliant, thank you.
I'd really appreciate if I can like collaborate and into this project, and if you need anything, any data or anything, I can get it for you.
I'd be happy to share your contacts with Adriana, Kunal, and
yes,
definitely please. Ada, can we share your data and can we share your contacts with forum members in a post?
Yeah, of course.
For sure. Yeah.
Brilliant. I will get that after and post it for everyone.
All right, that's great.
Oh, sorry about that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, I see Oyiza raising their hand. I'm going to allow you to talk, Oyiza. Hi, Oyiza. Tell us where you're from.
Hello, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Oyiza Adaba. I'm with a media company called Africa Related. I'm based in New York, but I'm from Nigeria, and we cover African stories and stories from African perspective. It's very interesting that you are holding this webinar because in my country, I don't know if you're aware, but we recently had the EndSARS movement, which was really just young people coming out to ask the government to give them a chance and to talk against police brutality and other social injustices in the country. And it was predominantly a peaceful protest until the soldiers were set in, and there was a lot of violence during that period. Following that, there was a rampage throughout the country with a lot of looting going on. it was during this looting that it was discovered that there were COVID-19 palliatives that had been distributed to the country since the beginning of the pandemic, but had not gotten to the people. And these foodstuff and other material were stored in warehouses across the country. And what started out as a peaceful protest against for government to hear some of these issues now deteriorated into, you know, a looting spree across the country, where, you know, it was further exposed the disparities within the country, where hungry Nigerians came out to help themselves to what the government couldn't bring to them. Now, there has been different responses from our government, from not knowing about it to, you know, saving it for a rainy day to all sorts. My question is, without taking too much of your time, and thank you again for holding this conversation, is how do we in Nigeria, for example, going through this and seeing this happening, how can we hold our government accountable with data that this is what they received and this is what went to the people? Thank you.
Thank you, Oyuza. Maybe something, go on, Ada.
Yeah, so there are if you're asking especially about data, I don't know about that much about getting like really, like, you know, foodstuffs and equipment, if there's much
even
data
funding
about it.
I'm sorry, even the funding.
There is are you familiar with the IATI database? It's the every overseas development, it's a data that are being collected on all sorts of, you know, NGOs giving money or governments giving money to, for example, countries in Africa, and they have to keep data. Now I'm gonna pass another link in the chat. There's this financial tracking service by the United Nations, and there is also IATI Explorer. There's also other data on many of these, you know, basically of the money coming from richer countries to poorer countries, and it's absolutely worth to look into, because now with COVID, they have they are it's mandatory to mark every flow of money that is connected to COVID in this, you know, aid data, to mark it with COVID-19. And you can explore this data for Nigeria, for sure, using this these websites. I'm gonna look for, there's this particular explorer. I think it's this deep portal, where you can also filter on the country and filter on all the aid data that have been submitted, and it's this one. So please check out these two links, and there you could find, I think you can find a lot of data there.
Thank
Wonderful.
you, Oyuza.
Thank you much.
Happy to. Good luck.
And I see there's someone called Oppo A52. That's a very mysterious Zoom handle, but I'm going to allow you to talk, Oppo. Hi, Oppo. How are you?
Hi, are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you. Tell us who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, this is me, Ramu Saput. I'm from Nepal.
Oh, nice to meet you.
I am a health correspondent for Himal. It's a news weekly magazine published from Nepal. So I'm following the government contract about the PP, RT kit, and you know, like that PCR machine, like that. So I want to know that recently the Ministry of Health like that. The supplied the amount of RDT kit from Chinese company is called Lipu Medical Technology. So I want to know that about how many countries buy RDT from Lipu Medical. I mean, like that country technology. It's from China. So is there any integrated online platform that I can track down supply chain of medical goods from a specific supply company to a specific country's government? So this is my question.
Yes, this is a very good question, and I wish there was an easy answer to this. But as I said, the data set that we have published, I mean, it's just it's just a Google sheet. So if you go into there and you do your searches, you might, if the company is there, you might encounter it. There's also another. Let me just search very quickly for you, because there is this other project that's called Open Ops that is also collecting a lot of tender data, and they have they are doing this primarily for the buyers, for the governments to kind of find suppliers. However, they have published, I'm gonna paste the link in the chat. They have published on this website, OpenOps/insight/contract summary. Oh wait, you can't really search for names of the companies here. Yeah. Now you can search for keywords of what you're looking for, like for example PPE, and then search in here, and then you'll find supplier names. Now it's not, and now that I'm seeing this again, it's not particularly probably useful for you, but we have lots of data on this too. We have data on about 20,000 companies are in our data set. So please, I don't know if you have the link for the story that we showed you, but I'm gonna put that here, and there you can go to the COVID-19 spending tracker, and you can have a look for your company. Now there is also a ProPublica dashboard about the COVID-19 spending in the US, and I'm not sure if it's still on somewhere on the main page. ProPublica COVID-19. I'm just going to look very quickly for you.
Just share it on the chat.
Thank you. And as I mentioned, there was this huge investigation in Latin America where they also published some data sets on the tenders. So that might be worth to check out as well.
Okay, I'll look at this. So is it possible to get your PowerPoint presentation through email or?
Oh, so at least I didn't have a PowerPoint presentation. I was sharing screens and links, but we'll make sure those links are published to the forum, like all the links that you're seeing here on the chat. So it will be available. And maybe I'm going to ask IJNet to do a special story on this, to kind of share these data resources based on this story and also based on the questions everyone here on this webinar has. Thank you so much, Wilpo.
Thank you so much for providing this platform to asking questions to the panelists. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. And Dada, you actually mentioned Panjiva. I'm just going to share this my screen really quick. Could you tell us a bit about Panjiva, Dada? Oh.
Actually, at the moment we don't use Panjiva at OCCRP because we just don't have a subscription. But Panjiva is a paid and actually very expensive, unfortunately, database, which has lots of customs declarations for different countries. And the search there is established in a way that you can search all the declarations for a separate company, as Oppo was asking about. Yeah. And You just can, if you know the exact Chinese company that you're interested in, you can know where and when it exported the goods and which goods were declared, at least, because sometimes companies export goods and set the wrong the wrong goods in the declaration, especially if they export some illegal things.
And even though this is a subscription-only database, there was something I vaguely remembered that it is available in some universities. I don't know if any of you.
Yes, it is available in some universities all around the world because they have some specific subscriptions, and sometimes it's available in some huge libraries. In the US, for example, I know that New York Library has it, and
the Library of Congress, I think.
Library of Congress for sure has it, but I don't think that in many Asian countries or many European countries we have it in libraries or in universities, unfortunately. Though, if you somehow find through some of your contacts that you can access this database, I would strongly recommend to use it, because as far as I know, it also has declarations data for China and for Chinese companies, because at OCCRP we use ImportGenius database and it doesn't have any Chinese declarations, unfortunately.
Yeah, so these are resources. We'll share all these links with everyone, but that's actually another good thing to highlight. Like if you're looking to access databases where you as a journalist don't have money for the subscriptions, like definitely check out your local universities, because some of those databases might be available. And Data, I was wondering, since we have you here, could you tell us a bit about your analysis of the medical supplies for the story and what tips that you have to offer other reporters here in the forum?
Yes, sure. I would first tell my story. I'm based in Moscow in Russia, and I studied Russian procurement contracts for many years now. When I started as a data journalist in Russia several years ago, I always was interested in medicines too, and in medicines bought by government, because we have a very interesting situation here in Russia, because our government buys lots of medicines and lobbies lots of medicines because it's company lobbying, and that's it. We also have prices for many medicines regulated by government. So the situation is very, very interesting. And I first started government procurement contracts for COVID medicines in Russia. And we had a huge list of medicines that were bought, as they said, due to COVID. And actually those medicines were really strange. Then our Minister of Health published guidelines for doctors how to treat COVID. And they had many medicines that didn't have any proof that they actually work against COVID, but they were in all the guidelines, and all the hospitals started buying it like a lot, and they spent millions of euros for these medicines, and they bought it from the companies that are lobbied by Ministry of Health. And when I saw this in Russia, my hypothesis was that it's not only Russia where it happens, but also European countries. And I contacted Ada and proposed to her that to see what goes on with the tenders for medicines in Europe, because it's not all the countries that we have in these tender documents, but at least in those where we could check it, I wish to check it. So what we made to make our research, I made a list of medicines that were used in different countries, that were mentioned in different guidelines, and that were mentioned by World Health Organization. You know probably that there was a huge international research of several medicines, whether they work against COVID or not, that was called Solidarity, that was ran by World Health Organization. And we took those medicines that participated in this research. For example, that was remdesivir, that was a very nice story in the US in July, when it appeared that all the remdesivir in the world was bought by the US government to supply to the US hospitals. And that was it.
Kind of says quite a lot about the iniquities in the supply chain, right?
Yes, that is. Also, that is very expensive medicine, but unfortunately, in October, it was proved that it does not help with COVID, except for the earliest stages. So if a person at the earliest stages takes remdesivir, they would not get sick and probably die. But at the latest stages, when they usually use it, it doesn't help at all. So we took this list of medicines and we ran it through the government procurement data, and we exported lots of contracts and tried to estimate prices, tried to estimate who buys these medicines, who sells these medicines, at what prices per unit. The last one is really hard. As Ada already mentioned, masks are really hard to estimate per unit, and medicines are even harder because medicines are in different dosage, in different forms. And all in all, it's not that, usually it's not mentioned that these medicines are bought for COVID, and all those medicines were not designed for COVID, and we had to establish somehow whether the contracts for these medicines rose due to COVID or not. So we checked some like a timeline, many years, to understand whether can we say that those medicines, for example, the dexamethasone, which is a corticosteroid medicine used with some COVID-related sickness, can we say that these institutions buy this medicine to treat COVID or not? For example, I found that huge contracts for huge contracts for dexamethasone rose like many folds in this year comparing to previous years, which showed us that the hospitals buy. I think that this is the proof for our hypothesis that the hospitals buy lots of this medicine to treat this new disease, comparing to the past years. And so also, the tips to when you try to analyze any situation with medicines, my first tip will be the following, which is very simple. You know that medicines have international names, which is the name of the substance, and medicines have a brand name, which is the name under which is sold on the market. And sometimes that is the same name, but sometimes that is not. Also, many medicines have generics, and they are sold under different brand names. So when you try to study medicine contracts, first thing to do is to establish what is international name, what is the name of the substance, and make a list of all the brand names under which they are sold in the market. The next thing is try to establish how medicines are sold in your country. For example, in Russia, medicines shall be sold one medicine per contract, but they actually don't do it. So they make tenders for a huge bunch of medicines, and after that you cannot extract prices for different medicines from the contract. But if your country have the same regulation, and if the companies that claim tenders, like they follow this regulation, probably will be okay with that, and probably will be okay to find unit prices. And unit prices is usually the one that the most important thing that interests you, because many times medicines are sold like with huge margin, like with
inflated prices, markups.
With inflated price markups. And probably that's what you are interested in, because that means that huge farm companies actually drive money from people being sick. I personally don't think that is any good.
Yeah, that's definitely not ethical. And maybe I was also thinking one of the stories that could be done like out of this data set or for people regionally who are collecting this data is to kind of check out those contracts that were no bid, that there was no competition for the contracts, and sort of ask questions about whether that company got that contract on a political favor and explore that a bit further.
Yeah, I mean, most of these contracts were no bid contracts. So we found really like 180 million euros contract. A single company was a no bid. It was a no bid contract, which is a lot of money. I think there was a procurement on a European level that was for 1.5 billion euros, and these are prices that we can't even imagine of how much money that is. What I think would be very interesting to look into in this no bid context is where are these companies situated? Are these companies that have their ultimate owner in Bermuda or Panama or Cyprus, and kind of look how transparent or untransparent is the ownership structures of these companies.
That's definitely good stories
Yeah.
for reporters to work on. Now, Hui, you're in Portugal, right?
Yep.
And I read in the story that you had probably one of the more transparent data sets out of a lot of data. In fact, what was it, 15,000 pieces of procurement data out of Portugal. What can you tell us about that data? And have any other journalists in the country kind of looked at it at a national level to examine that data?
I think what happened with Portugal, which is it was really weird because I'm not used to be in a country where open data is such a thing. We actually have very good procurement data, but I'm not used to it. And I think what happened is exactly normally the problem is lack of data. This time we had excess of data because it was a lot of contracts to check. Basically the government at the beginning of the pandemic said, okay, we are going to spend a lot of money. So we will publish in an Excel file all the contracts that we are going to do. And it was a really good idea. And the first time I checked, it had like 300 contracts, so nothing. So I thought, this is not going to be a really interesting data set. But I only checked on the first week and I completely forgot. Then Ada talked with me and said, look, we are going to do this. Are you interested to work with us? And I said, yeah, I think we have a data set with that. And yeah, it was much more data. So yeah, no one in the country really looked at it. We had some stories published in other news outlets, like this company got this big contract, but basically because everyone was looking at the big contracts, and of course big contracts are important, but there are like smallish or medium-sized contracts that are not that big. Actually, we had this like big dashboard where everybody could check the data and do some queries and search and see how much a company got. And actually, the third company that got the most money, they are not like a big group. They are not like a big company. They used to be merchandising company that sold those merchandising stuff that they just bought from China. And they basically they turned their business to masks and tests because they had really good contracts in China. And they actually didn't have like those very big contracts, but they sold a lot of small contracts to local government, like mayors and that. and they actually became the third company who got the most money from it. So that actually helped us have a big overview of how many are we spending, and it was actually interesting seeing some regional differences, you know, during the country, because we found out that actually local government had a big part on buying this kind of material. Obviously, like the national government bought the big and they did the big contracts, but actually a lot of local government spend a lot of money, and it was actually interesting seeing some of these differences on it. But actually, the main story is that one of the biggest the biggest private health group in Portugal, Grupo Luz Saúde, that they are actually part of Group Fosun. They are a Chinese big group. They had like they almost closed their hospitals during the pandemic, because no one was going to private hospitals, everybody was using public hospitals. But they kind of shift their business and they started importing material to send to sell to the government, and that was actually really interesting to see those patterns. Obviously, we have this data, and we are still looking at it, because we have this price units database, and they show some very interesting differences. We have this. It's obviously, like Data said, it's always very hard to see if we are comparing the right stuff, because even we had categorized. For example, we found out like we had these very expensive masks on the database, and I just talked with like 2 days ago. I just talked with the person that bought that masks, and they actually they forgot to put a 0 on the amount, so that's why they were so expensive. So there are this kind of stuff, you know, but we are still digging that data and trying to.
And is this something you'd like the assistance? Because I think something Ada had mentioned to me is that there are so many local and national stories that can come out of this data. And is this something you'd ideally like other Portuguese journalists to help you examine? We actually have a Portuguese language forum, and I can connect you with the community manager there if you would like to present this data to the journalists on that forum.
Yeah, I would like to add to this that, I mean, tender data is very tricky to work with. Exactly, this is one of the reasons why, because we also in our database we had the Dutch tender that was 190 million euros, and then our Dutch partner was writing me a message. He's like, there are 2 zeros too much. They put it, I mean, the database, the source data say 190 million, but the actual price when he checked with the supplier was 1,900,000. So there were just 2 zeros too much, which makes obviously a huge difference, right? If you win like 200 million or 2 million.
So verifying this data and cross-checking.
And that's also why we did not make, I think, more stories, because it takes a lot of effort to verify everything. So that's why we were more careful in what we were publishing.
And this is why, yeah, go on.
No, I just wanted to add, because you asked about like cross-national companies selling stuff. One thing that I've discussed with Ada during when we were working on the story is like, okay, it should be interesting to try to understand who got the most in Europe, you know, because. But one thing that I actually, and that's really hard to work on, and that explains why this data is so hard to work on with. It's like for example, she talked about Hosh and other big Philips, for example. They actually have national holdings. So even though on the Portuguese database they are called Philips Portugal, then you and they have like a national how do you call that, the number of the company,
VAT number, or
yeah, VAT, exactly.
yeah.
So they actually have a Portuguese VAT, so that one I know it's Philips because they have Philips on the name. But they can create an holding like with a random number, a random name on it, and it's actually Philips, but you don't know. So
Yeah,
sometimes
they can buy a company that is something
Exactly.
completely different, and you just don't know.
You don't know, and you don't know. So it's very tricky to work with data across countries because companies have these things like, and it's really hard.
But I do think, sorry.
No, I would like we actually did that using like the names of the companies. So we knew like Philips Portugal is probably there's a 90% chance that it's Philips, but I'm sure there are companies that have these different names and are part of big groups in Europe or in the world.
So, for example, a research question that you could ask is like, what was the role of Roche in the whole, emergency procurement? It's a very, this is something that this data can help you with exploring, because once you get deeper and deeper, then you can find all the subsidiaries and so forth. So, yeah, just that. And I know we are over time, so sorry, that was my last remark.
Oh yeah, I didn't even notice we were over time. This discussion is so good. I don't know if anyone has any final questions to ask. And if not, I'm going to ask maybe for a final remark from each of you to give to the journalists who are currently watching. And maybe we'll start with Ada and go around.
Yeah, I would really love, I mean, as I know that we said that this data is difficult to work with, but there is a lot to discover. This is public money being spent without any competition at all, and it's a lot of money. So, have a look at it, play around with it, and if you need any assistance with whatsoever, please, let me know, drop me an email. I'm really happy to help.
Dara?
I would wish to inspire everyone to work with this data or any other procurement data that you have in your countries, because it's always fascinating what you can find there. Not only COVID procurements, tenders, but like with any field that you can imagine. And we have, since in Russia, we have like very open data about procurement. We analyze it constantly and we find new stories and new corruption examples, cartels, and so on and so forth. And sometimes you can fight with that, just analyzing the standards and publishing your analysis, because if you have some agencies working with cartels, anti-monopoly agencies, and so on, you'll probably be able to show this to start the investigation.
Rui?
Yeah, I will say the same thing that is said. Like, don't be afraid to have a look on the data, because you'll surely find stories there. Basel, our local or Portuguese procurement Portugal, it's always a source of stories for journalists here in Portugal. And don't be overwhelmed with all the data, because it can be a bit frightening, especially when you have to clean it. But it's the time you spend cleaning it and having a look at it that will make you find the story there. Because normally the weird things or the story is not on the big numbers. It's on the smallish contracts that will probably show you something relevant. So I encourage you to do it.
Super. Thank you three so much for joining us. And now that we've kind of done this walkthrough through the story, the OCCRP procurement data is available for you to look at. And if you're in countries where that data isn't necessarily on OCCRP's website, we really encourage you to check the local procurement data where you are. Thank you for offering your research insights, your tips. And if you do decide to do a data story like this, we have a sequel webinar happening next week with Code for Africa's Chief of Data, Jacopo Ottaviani. And he's also a former ICFJ Knight Fellow. And he's going to be showing us a webinar on how to put together data visualizations and setting up the data workflow from beginning to end to the publication of a story. So we really recommend you come to that next week if you're interested in following up and doing a project like this one. Thank you so much, everyone. And everyone stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, Stella, for having us.
Thank you for being here. And thank you, Dada and Hui, for joining us.
Thank you for everybody who joined.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.